Before we begin tonight's story, let me say this clearly. What you're about to hear is not folklore created to entertain, and it's not a rumor passed around for fun. This is a real place in the United States where history itself seems to hesitate. For generations, people have whispered about a town hidden deep inside a forest so thick that daylight struggles to reach the ground. A town where families arrived hopeful and left broken. A place where sickness appeared without warning, where grief settled into the air, and where no one seemed to stay sane for very long. Some people abandoned their homes overnight. Some lost their families, and some were never spoken of again. What makes this story different is not just what happened, it's how quietly it happened. No mass grave, no official disaster, just a town that faded as if it were being erased. Even today, the land is sealed, protected, watched, not because anything lives there, but because of what once did. Before I continue, let me ask you kindly, if stories rooted in truth, history, and unanswered questions matter to you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with family and friends. And when the story ends, I'd truly like to know, how did it make you feel? You can tell me in the comments. Now, take a breath, because the story doesn't start with fear, it starts with hope. In the early 1700s, a small group of settlers made a decision that would quietly shape everything that followed. They chose to build a town deep inside a narrow valley in northwestern Connecticut, far from busy roads and established communities. At the time, the land seemed like an opportunity, inexpensive, secluded, and surrounded by endless forest. But the land was never welcoming. The soil was thin and rocky, unsuitable for reliable farming. Hills rose on all sides, blocking sunlight for much of the day. Even in summer, the valley felt cold and damp. Winters arrived early, stayed long, and punished anyone unprepared for isolation. Farming families struggled immediately. Crops failed year after year. Livestock weakened. Hunting was unreliable. Survival required constant effort, leaving little room for comfort or peace of mind. And then there was the silence. The nearest towns were miles away, separated by thick woods and rough terrain. Roads were poor and travel was slow. Visitors were rare, and when they did pass through, they often remarked on how heavy the place felt. Not frightening, just oppressive, as if something pressed down on the air. Residents began to change. Letters and records from neighboring towns describe people from this settlement as withdrawn, unusually somber, and emotionally unstable. Children grew quiet. Adults complained of exhaustion without illness. Some spoke openly about feeling watched, though they couldn't explain why. This wasn't chaos or sudden tragedy, it was erosion. Small accidents became common. Fires broke out without clear cause. Illness spread more easily than expected. Death visited more often than statistics could justify, even by the harsh standards of colonial life. Still, families stayed. They built homes, opened a modest schoolhouse, and tried to maintain routine. They prayed, they worked, they endured. But endurance has limits. Something about this land drained people slowly, not violently, but persistently, until staying felt heavier than leaving. And long before anyone spoke of curses or fear, one truth became impossible to ignore. This town had been built in a place that did not want it there. By the time the town had been standing for a few decades, something subtle but unmistakable had changed. On the surface, life continued. People worked their land, children were raised. The small schoolhouse still opened its doors. But normal life had begun to fray at the edges. Conversations grew shorter. Neighbors kept their distance. Visitors from nearby towns later recalled how quickly the mood shifted once they entered the valley. Laughter felt out of place. Even ordinary moments seemed weighed down by a quiet tension no one could name. Written records from surrounding communities describe residents of the settlement as troubled and melancholic. Some were said to suffer from sudden mood changes, deep sadness, and paranoia. At the time, these symptoms had no clear explanation. Mental illness was poorly understood, and suffering was often endured in silence. Then came the incidents no one could ignore. One man wandered into the surrounding forest and was found dead weeks later, having starved despite knowing the land well. Another resident reportedly suffered a complete mental collapse, killing his own family before disappearing into the woods himself. These events were recorded without drama, as if even the writers didn't want to linger on them. After that, departures increased. Families left without ceremony. Houses were abandoned with furniture still inside. Tools were left where they lay. It wasn't the careful planning of a move. It felt hurried, almost desperate. Those who relocated to nearby towns rarely spoke about their time in the valley. When questioned, they offered vague explanations: poor land, hard winters, bad luck. But their discomfort was obvious. Some refused to return even for funerals. What's most unsettling is what didn't happen. There was no epidemic, no fire that destroyed the town, no flood, no war, no official evacuation. Nothing that could neatly explain why an entire community began to unravel. Church attendance stopped, birth and death records became irregular, letters simply ceased. By the early 1800s, the settlement no longer functioned as a town. It wasn't declared abandoned, it simply fell silent. And as the last families left, the forest closed in behind them. Not violently, not suddenly, just patiently, as if it had been waiting all along. For many years after the valley went silent, people referred to it without naming it at all. They called it that place in the woods, the old settlement, the abandoned valley. Even official records avoided clarity, as if writing the name gave it weight. But eventually, the name surfaced, not shouted, not announced, simply acknowledged. It was called Dudleytown. On paper, Dudleytown was nothing remarkable. It never grew large, it never prospered, it never appeared in major historical accounts. And yet, for a place so small, it carried an unusually heavy reputation. The name itself was tied to one family, the Dudleys, early settlers whose history reached far beyond Connecticut. In England, centuries earlier, one of their ancestors, Edmund Dudley, had been executed for treason. According to long-standing legend, he cursed his bloodline before his death. Whether that curse was real or simply a story passed down through generations, tragedy seemed to follow the family wherever they settled. Multiple members of the Dudley line suffered mental illness, sudden deaths, and financial ruin. When they arrived in this isolated valley, misfortune appeared to intensify rather than fade. By the time Dudleytown emptied, neighboring communities had taken notice. Maps began omitting the name. Property records became vague. The town was no longer spoken of as a former settlement, but as a mistake. People avoided the area deliberately. Parents warned their children not to wander near the ruins. Hunters refused to pass through the valley. Travelers took longer routes just to stay clear of it. What made Dudleytown unsettling was not a single horrific event. It was the pattern. Generation after generation, anyone who tried to live there suffered in some way. Not always dramatically. Sometimes it was quiet despair. Sometimes it was madness. Sometimes it was death. And so the name became something people mentioned carefully, if at all. Not because they believed the town was alive, but because too many believed it had been wrong from the very beginning. A place where life failed, not loudly, but completely. And once Dudleytown was finally named for what it was, most people agreed on one thing: nothing good ever came from staying there too long. And that understanding would follow anyone who dared to return. Once Dudleytown had been abandoned and named, it didn't disappear from memory. Instead, it lingered, quietly drawing the attention of people who believed fear came from misunderstanding, not place. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, hikers, historians, and artists began visiting the ruins. Most expected nothing more than fallen stone foundations and overgrown paths. What many reported instead was something far less visible. They spoke of how quickly the forest closed around them. The valley is surrounded by steep hills and unusually dense trees, even for New England. Sunlight rarely reaches the ground. Sounds behave strangely there. Footsteps echo oddly, voices feel muted, and silence feels heavier than it should. Visitors often reported a sudden sense of disorientation. Paths seemed unfamiliar within minutes. Some felt an intense pressure in their chest, accompanied by nausea or panic. Others described the overwhelming feeling that they were being watched, though nothing could be seen. Skeptics offered explanations. Iron-rich rock formations in the area may interfere with compasses and perception. The terrain itself is difficult to navigate, and isolation can heighten anxiety. All reasonable possibilities, but explanations didn't stop the stories. One visitor in the early 1900s reportedly fled the forest in visible distress, insisting he heard someone whisper his name from behind him. Another group left abruptly after feeling what they described as unprovoked terror, unable to explain what had triggered it. None of these accounts included ghosts, apparitions, or supernatural sightings. That's what makes them unsettling. The fear was internal, psychological, but shared by many who entered independently of one another. Over time, Dudleytown gained a new reputation, not as a haunted place in the traditional sense, but as a location that disturbed the mind. People didn't claim they saw something, they claimed they felt something, and that feeling was enough to keep most away. As word spread, fewer visitors returned. Those who did often stayed only briefly. Some refused to speak about their experience at all, as if putting it into words made it stronger. By the early 20th century, Dudleytown was no longer just an abandoned settlement. It was a place people entered cautiously and left quickly, if they left at all. For many years, Dudleytown remained abandoned but accessible. There were no fences, no guards, no official warnings. It was simply a forgotten place that people approached with caution. That changed in the early 20th century. large portions of the land surrounding the ruins were quietly purchased by private interests. Among them were families of considerable wealth and influence, including individuals connected to the Rockefeller estate. The stated purpose was conservation, to preserve the forest and prevent vandalism of historical land. Not long after, access became restricted. Paths were blocked, signs appeared, trespassers were warned away, then arrested. Local police began patrolling the area regularly. What had once been a forgotten settlement became one of the most tightly controlled abandoned sites in the state. Official explanations focused on safety. The terrain was unstable, the forest was dense, injuries had occurred. And that was true. The valley is difficult to navigate, even for experienced hikers. But many locals felt the response went beyond simple caution. Other abandoned towns in New England were left open, preserved, or turned into historical landmarks. Dudleytown was different. There were no guided tours, no plaques, no public acknowledgement beyond "keep out." The message was clear. This was not a place meant for curiosity. Over time, the restrictions only fueled speculation. Why protect a place no one wanted to live in? Why guard empty forest with such persistence? Authorities never offered more detail. And perhaps that silence was intentional. If you're finding this story as unsettling as I did the first time I learned it, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who appreciates real stories rooted in history. It helps keep these forgotten places from disappearing entirely. As the years passed, Dudleytown's reputation hardened. It wasn't just abandoned, it was forbidden. And forbidden places invite two kinds of people: those who stay away and those who feel compelled to cross the line. The latter would learn quickly why the land had been closed, not because something chased them, but because the longer they stayed, the stronger the feeling became that they were not welcome and never had been. The forest did not need walls. It had its own way of enforcing silence. Whenever a place gains a reputation like Dudleytown's, reason eventually steps in. Historians, scientists, and psychologists all offered explanations meant to strip the fear away and return the story to something understandable. And many of those explanations make sense. Geographers point out that the valley's location made survival unusually difficult. The surrounding hills blocked sunlight for most of the day, creating colder temperatures and persistent dampness. Poor soil made farming unreliable, and isolation amplified every hardship. For a struggling colonial settlement, failure was almost inevitable. Psychologists suggest inherited mental illness played a role. Several members of the Dudley family suffered from depression and instability, conditions that were poorly understood at the time. Combined with isolation, hunger, and stress, mental health could deteriorate rapidly. Geologists have also noted that iron-rich rock deposits in the area may interfere with compasses and contribute to feelings of disorientation. Add deep forest cover and limited visibility, and it becomes easier to understand why visitors felt lost so quickly. All of this is reasonable. And yet, even when every explanation is laid out, something remains unresolved. Because reason explains why a town might fail, but it doesn't explain why nearly everyone who entered later felt the same dread. It doesn't explain why unrelated visitors across different decades reported similar sensations: sudden panic, confusion, heaviness in the chest, and an overwhelming desire to leave. It doesn't explain why locals who knew the science still refused to walk there. Fear doesn't require belief. It only requires experience. Even those who dismissed the legends admitted the place felt different, Not dramatic, not theatrical, just profoundly uncomfortable. And that's the part Reason struggles with. Dudleytown doesn't demand belief in curses or spirits. It doesn't show itself. It doesn't announce danger. It simply wears people down, slowly, quietly. And that may be why the story refuses to fade. Because when fear can't be pinned to one cause, it becomes harder to dismiss. Logic may explain the land, history may explain the people, but something about Dudleytown remains untouched by explanation, a feeling that lingers long after facts are considered. And sometimes that's enough to keep people away, even those who should know better. Even though Dudleytown has been closed for decades, there are always a few who feel compelled to enter. Curiosity, skepticism, or the thrill of danger draws them into the dense forest, despite warnings, fences, and the reputation the land carries. Some go in during the day, others choose twilight, when shadows stretch long across the valley floor. And many, it seems, do not come out unchanged. Officially, no records exist of disappearances, but unofficially, stories persist. Hikers, photographers, and amateur historians have described returning from the forest visibly shaken, unable to explain exactly what happened. Some avoid conversations about it entirely. Others speak in hushed tones, insisting the place made them feel watched, pressured, or even pursued, though no one or nothing could be seen. One group of visitors reported feeling a sudden and unshakable panic as soon as they crossed the threshold into the valley. Their compasses failed, their sense of direction vanished, and voices that seemed to echo from nowhere whispered warnings they could not understand. They left quickly and never returned. Another solo traveler described the forest as oppressive, like the air itself is thick with expectation. He insisted that for every step forward, the forest seemed to rearrange itself. Landmarks vanished, paths shifted, time felt different. And while these stories cannot be verified, their consistency over decades is remarkable. People from different generations, different backgrounds, and different purposes all report a similar phenomenon. The longer they stayed, the heavier the feeling became, a weight pressing against the mind and spirit, a sensation of not belonging. This is why Dudleytown continues to fascinate and terrify those who hear its story. It is not just abandoned land, it is a place that actively discourages presence, a valley where the forest seems to have its own way of enforcing silence. And while trespassers are rare now, the legend persists. Dudleytown is remembered not for ghosts or curses, but for the inexplicable unease that follows anyone who crosses its borders. It is a reminder that some places do not welcome visitors. They may not harm you directly, but they leave a mark on your mind, a reminder that some histories cannot be walked through lightly. Even today, those who enter are reminded quietly but unmistakably that the land remembers, and it does not forgive. By now, Dudleytown has no residents. The buildings that once stood there have mostly collapsed or been swallowed by the forest. Foundations crumble under moss and roots. Pathways that once connected homes have disappeared entirely beneath fallen leaves and dense undergrowth. Yet, for all its emptiness, the valley continues to command attention. The forest has reclaimed what humans abandoned, but it has not forgotten the presence of those who once lived there. People who visit report the same eerie sensations as those who came decades ago, an almost physical heaviness pressing down, the feeling of being watched, the disorienting sense that the trees themselves are rearranging the world around you. There are no apparitions, no dramatic hauntings. The fear is quiet, subtle, persistent, and it is enough. Even without walls or residents, Dudleytown tells its story, not with words, but with atmosphere, with the way light struggles to reach the valley floor, with the way sounds behave strangely in the dense woods, with the stillness that lingers even when visitors are present. Those who have crossed its borders rarely speak of what they felt. Some refuse photographs, others leave immediately, unsettled in ways that last long after they return home. The forest does not need to chase people away. It simply enforces its boundaries in silence, and humans, unlike the land itself, obey instinctively. Dudleytown's story is not one of a single dramatic event. It is one of slow, quiet erasure, of lives drained by isolation, misfortune, and the uncompromising presence of the forest. And in that sense, the town remains alive, in memory, in legend, and in the quiet unease of continues to inspire. So now you know why people speak of Dudleytown as the forest that swallowed an entire town. It isn't the ghosts that haunt it, nor the curses some whisper about. It is the land itself, relentless, patient, and unforgettable. If this story stayed with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with friends and family who appreciate true mysteries rooted in history. And don't forget to tell me in the comments, did this story leave you unsettled, curious, or both? Some truths don't scream, they whisper. And Dudleytown has been whispering for centuries.